Welcome to another edition of the Ranger Rush. It's an exciting time for the New York Rangers and the NHL at large. The regular season getting underway with the Rangers playing their first game this Wednesday night in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. So with this episode, we're going to do a little bit of a season preview, talk about what this team needs to do to be successful and what the expectations are. Before we get to that, just a few kind of housekeeping items to go over. First, there was a little bit of a scare last week when Artemi Panarin appeared to re-aggravate a lower body injury he had suffered earlier in the preseason. Sounds like all things are good there, and that he should be good to go for the opener in Pittsburgh. So that's great news, obviously, for the Rangers. He was their clear team MVP, at least for the regular season last year. And some roster moves. So the last couple of days, they've been shuffling several waiver-exempt players to and from Hartford, mostly for purposes of salary cap accrual, just some paper transactions. But the net of all that, most notably, is that Adam Edstrom and the biggest surprise of camp, Victor Mancini, appear to be on the final opening night roster. So I would imagine that both will be in the lineup. It's possible Edstrom could be a scratch for someone like a Johnny Brodzinski. But I would imagine they're both on the roster to start the year, that they're both going to play in this opener. I know I said earlier after the Rangers' first preseason game against the Boston Bruins, where Victor Mancini really stood out, was the biggest sort of pleasant surprise of preseason. It was a nice story. It was good to see him kind of keep that up, but that he probably wouldn't make the team. But here he is. He's made the roster. Yes, there is the injury to Ryan Lindgren. I imagine when Lindgren returns, that Mancini will be sent back down to Hartford. But nevertheless, a great accomplishment for him. Exciting to see, a young guy in camp kind of come in and force the coach's hands here. So I imagine he'll be in the lineup over Chad Ruhwedel Wednesday night. Other than that, we did. Speaking of Lindgren, was placed on injured reserve, so no salary cap benefits there for the Rangers. But he only has to miss, I believe it's 7 days, just on the injured reserve. Whereas conversely, the team placed Jimmy Vesey, who also got hurt in preseason and in practice, actually, placed him on long-term injured reserve. So he has to miss, unfortunately, a minimum of 10 games in 24 days. So with him on LTIR, they do save for now a little bit of cap space, allowing them to carry 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, and of course 2 goalies. So with that, I believe it seems like Edstrom's going to have every opportunity to kind of make his mark in the lineup on that fourth line. When VC comes back, it'll be a bit of a numbers game for the Rangers, but that's always a good problem to have. Of course, the other big thing that's been in the news as of Tuesday here, is Igor Shesterkin. There's been speculation about him signing a contract extension very soon, hopefully before the season, potentially in the season, potentially later, with this being the last year of his current contract. And Kevin Weeks reported today being Tuesday, that Shesterkin actually turned down an 8-year, $11 million per year offer from the Rangers. And, I saw a lot of kind of mixed reactions to that. Some people saying, good for him. He is clearly not only arguably the best goaltender in the game, but he's the Rangers' really most important player. And in the playoffs, the main reason they made it as far as they did in that Florida series to a Game 6, because they were badly outplayed for most of it. Other sides of it, I've seen, everything from Shesterkin is being greedy. He's not thinking of the team first. To the Rangers can't have one player, particularly a goalie, making this much money and taking up all that cap space. But, where I land on it is more so with that former school of thought that, he can get more money and he knows it. I think, he wants $12 million by all the reports of reading between the lines seem to be indicating that he's looking for $12 million. I see them ultimately settling somewhere between an 11.5 and $12 million. Shesterkin knows how important he is, knows how to the Rangers, and he knows how good he is. And, this is his chance to get his bag, as they say. And I think he should do that. And for those concerned that, hey, the Rangers, they're going to be paying him too much, they're not going to be able to build a good team if, one guy is making, and one guy in net is making that much money. But what's important to think about more so than the pure dollar amount, especially for a team like the Rangers, is, where they have enough money. They don't have to worry about how much they're spending, except when it comes to the salary cap. So on that, it's the biggest thing for the Rangers and fans to remember is that what matters more than the dollar amount is the percentage of the cap that a contract is taking up. And with the cap having just gone up pretty recently after that, after being stagnant right around the COVID time, but the cap's gone up and now it's projected to keep going up year to year. A long-term contract like Shesterkin wants to sign, let's say it's $12 million, that's going to be a lower and lower percentage of the cap, and frankly, in line with some of the other highest-paid goaltenders of recent years. So with that, just to kind of visualize that, pull up here. This is a chart courtesy of Hockey Stat Miner. He's a great follow on Twitter or X. He compiled this. If you look at it here, it's basically placing a projected contract for Shesterkin at $12 million per year, next to some other notable high-priced goalie contracts from recent years, including Henrik Lundqvist, Andrei Vasilevsky, Carey Price, and of course Sergei Bobrovsky, who takes up a pretty good chunk of cap space for the team that just won the Stanley Cup. So if we look here, this is assuming, if you see that note in the bottom right there, this assumes 3% annual salary cap growth starting after 2025, so after this season. So if we look at this, Shesterkin being the purple line here on the right, he's really right in line when you look at percentage of cap of his team's cap that a goalie is making up. So this whole notion of the Rangers are going to have enough space to build a good team in front of him, I think is frankly misguided. Because again, what matters more than the pure dollars in the salary cap world, and for a team with deep pockets as the Rangers, is the percentage of cap space. And you look at Andrei Vasilevsky, Sergei Bobrovsky, these are members of recent Stanley Cup winners, and they're all going to be making, if Shesterkin, let's say, gets his $12 million a year, they're all going to be in that same ballpark as far as percentage of the cap. So ultimately, I think that the fact that this report leaked out means that they might actually be closer to a deal than not, and someone might have leaked it strategically to kind of push things forward a little bit. We'll see if a deal gets done here. Obviously, opening night is right around the corner, but we'll see if a deal gets done early in the season, or if it's something they put off till later in the season or even after the season, if it's something they don't want to talk about any further during the year. But overall, for any Ranger fans who are panicking, I personally am not panicking about this. And I think Shesterkin deserves his money, and I think he'll get it from the Rangers. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully not, because that'd be obviously a big loss for the club. But I see this ultimately getting resolved, and when it does, not being too concerned about how much of the cap space that Shesterkin is taking up. Okay, so with that, let's actually go to a season preview piece. So there's obviously a season preview can really run the gamut in terms of things to discuss. So what I'll be doing is kind of leveraging an article I put together for Blue Shirt Banter that'll be going up Wednesday morning. Just kind of give everyone a little sneak peek of what that entails, at least, and especially insofar as what I've contributed to that, as far as what I think and what I project for the season upcoming here. So basically for that, I put together some questions and some thoughts and posed them all to the Blue Shirt Banter staff. We all contributed our answers and responding thoughts to that. So I'll mainly go over kind of what I'm thinking here, but also maybe offer some of the other points of view and maybe some points where we had consensus or not. So with that, let's get right to it. As far as regular season goes, where do we all think the Rangers are going to finish in the Metro Division standings? So I'm normally a little more of a pessimist, but based on last year where the club finished first place, not only in the division, but the entire NHL in the regular season, I think that's going to happen again. Now, do I think they're going to have, the 114 points that they had last season? Not quite. I think they're going to maybe fall a little bit short of that. But I think the bigger thing is, they've still got most of their core intact. They added a nice complementary piece in Riley Smith. Hopefully, Filipino is going to stay healthy for most of the year. So I think they still have, even though their veteran core that leads them is starting to age a little bit, I still think they've got, more in the tank for another great regular season. But the other side to that is thinking about who else is going to compete with them in the division, right? The Hurricanes have been the team the last few years that has been right there at top of the Metro standings with the Rangers. I think they're going to be good again. Their systems, especially at even strength, really just kind of give them a high floor. They can kind of plug and play with a lot of different guys. But that being said, I think that they lost a decent amount in the offseason. They've had some turnover. Obviously, Brady Shea signing in Nashville is one of them. Brett Pesce. So that was a key defensive pair for them. That's just totally gone. They did add Shane Gostisbehere and Sean Walker. But I lost Jay Gensel after the trade deadline up front. So I think that they're going to take a little bit of a step back. I think they'll obviously still be competitive, but I don't see them being quite as strong as they've been the last 2-3 years. The other team I think is going to threaten the Rangers the most in the division is the New Jersey Devils, as much as Ranger fans might hate to hear that. Again, 2 years ago, the Devils had a great season, beat the Rangers in that playoff series where the Rangers blew that 2-0 series lead. Young, fast, exciting team, and it seemed that they were really on a fast rise and that they were going to continue to get better. They just needed to address some things in net and defensively. And frankly, they didn't do that at all pretty much last year until the season was basically lost. And they put a couple Band-Aids on in net with Kaapo Kähkönen and Jake Allen. But in the offseason, their GM, Tom Fitzgerald, finally aggressively addressed those deficiencies. They picked up Jacob Markstrom as a starting goaltender, an established veteran goalie. They picked up Brett Pesce, aforementioned, he left Carolina. He signed with the Devils. Brendan Dillon as well for the back end. Shipped out John Marino as part of the deal with Utah. So between that and projecting that some of their guys who were hurt for a good amount of the year last year, like Jack Hughes, for instance, are a little healthier this year, I think that they're pretty poised for a bounce back, and they're going to be competing with the Rangers and Hurricanes at the top of that division. But ultimately, I see the Rangers edging out those two teams for the division crown. A lot of our writers agree. A couple have the Rangers in second and third. But bottom line is we all think that they're going to be competing right there at the top of the division once again. So another question I posed, and of course answered for myself, when you look at this Rangers team kind of taking a step back, right? So coming off President's Trophy winning season, just like in 2022, it ended 2 games short of a Stanley Cup final appearance. So what's the expectation for the Rangers this season? Or at least how much do they have to do for fans to be satisfied, right? So in a league and a sport as volatile as the NHL, especially when you get to the small sample sizes of playoffs, I think it's kind of difficult and frankly kind of unreasonable to say Stanley Cup or bust. But as far as what this team's done in recent years, after a President's Trophy, another deep playoff run, what else is there to achieve, right? That's the clear, glaring, obvious elephant in the room goal and item they have to check off the list, right? I guess, they haven't been to the final itself since 2014 where they lost to the LA Kings. So maybe that's the next step. And maybe if they get there, even if they were to fall short, that'd be considered success. I think that's very reasonable to say. But in any event, I think, the Rangers, they're in a weird situation, right? As I kind of mentioned before, they have a decent amount of good young players, Alexis Lafreniere, Philip Hedl, if he stays healthy, Kaapo Kähkönen. That one gets a little complicated because he's underachieved, but, pieces on the back end like Keandre Miller and Braden Schneider. So they've got some good young players. But the most of the players who really drive the bus and really drive their success are veterans. And when you think about that core group of veterans who's really kind of leading the way for them, the window for that group is closing. I mean, Jacob Trouba said before the season, seems like this is pretty much the last kick at the can for this group. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true for the whole group, but maybe it means at least for him being a part of it, given his situation, and feels like this is probably his last year, and the Rangers will look to move him in some fashion in the offseason for, if nothing else, for cap space reasons. But all that being said, I think it's really now or never. It's hard to imagine fans like the Rangers could finish in first place and get the President's Trophy again, but if they don't at least get to the final, let alone, and frankly, ideally win it, it's hard to imagine being satisfied because, we've seen this team do everything except lift that cup, right? So kind of hard to be satisfied if they don't get that ultimate prize, given where they are and not knowing if they're going to be able to reach this level consistently in the immediate years down the road. Most of our other writers agree with that. I won't give away too much. There's a little bit of variation in that, but you can check out Blue Shirt Banner for more and subscribe to that site if you're not already. Another question I pose is who will have a breakout season? So this is kind of an interesting one, I thought. The player I'm most excited to watch this season is Alexis Lafreniere and seeing if he can build off of what he did last season. But then thinking about breakout season, you can argue he kind of already had that last year. He had career high 28 goals, career high 57 points, and really had an outstanding postseason. By that conference final against Florida, I thought he was the Rangers' best player, besides Shesterkin and net, of course. So if we are saying that he's already kind of broken out, I think the excitement is to see him take an even further step. But if he's already had his quote unquote breakout, besides him, I think the guy to look at is Zach Jones on the back end, with Eric Gustafsson having signed in Detroit and the Rangers really not having replaced him on the roster besides, just bringing back Chad Ruhwedel as a depth guy. It seems like this is finally Jones's chance to cement an everyday spot in the lineup. And I think it was 31 games he played last year. I thought he was excellent. I think he's ready to become a mainstay and help produce some more offense from the back end, because that's always been the strength of his game. Maybe we'll see him get some time on the second power play unit. I think he's an exciting one to watch. I think as far as the breakout goes, this really is his time. I'd love to see Capo Caco finally break out, but at this point, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. For starters, let's see if he can stay healthy the whole year, because the last time he did that was a couple years ago, and he had 40 points, which is not blowing the doors off, but certainly respectable and at least some secondary scoring that the Rangers could certainly use. Another question I pose every year is who will end up as a scapegoat. This was kind of a layup after maybe some more thoughtful ones. The obvious answer here is Jacob Trouba. As I mentioned, between all the drama that happened in the offseason, his quote about this being kind of the last kick at the can for this group certainly feels like this is his last season on Broadway. Again, the contract is bad, but a big part of the reason for that is that he just hasn't lived up to expectations with his on-ice play and in the playoffs. I know he was a little bit banged up, but he was arguably the Rangers' worst defenseman and really cost the Rangers pretty heavily in that Florida series. So I think between that and all the drama in the offseason, he's pretty much the only answer for top scapegoat. Another notable one, though, if he doesn't pick up his 5-on-5 play, is Mika Zibanejad. He's the Rangers' number one center. Frankly, that guy was really Vincent Trocheck last year. But as far as the Rangers having ultimate success in the playoffs and getting to the final and potentially winning the final, I mean, they're going to need more out of Mika Zibanejad and his line at even strength. Last year, their only consistent line at even strength was the Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere line. So they're going to need a lot more at 5-on-5 overall, and that starts with getting more out of the guy who's supposed to be their top center, Zibanejad. Team MVP is another question I pose. So who would that be? I mean, last year I thought it was pretty clearly Panarin. Rangers have some good candidates here. For me, it's a pretty close call between Panarin and Shesterkin, and not to mention Adam Fox, who's one of the best defensemen in the entire league. But I'm going to go with Panarin again. Maybe a bit of a boring answer, but I do think that he's going to largely pick up where he left off last regular season, at least. Do I project 120 points again? Maybe not that many, but I think he's going to break 100 again. So I think he'll be the team MVP and maybe a Shesterkin a close second. Another question I posed was unsung hero. So began to allude to it a couple minutes ago, but thinking about that Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider line, it's going to be Riley Smith getting a shot at right wing on that line, at least to start the year. It's really been a revolving door there, trying to find the right fit for those two ever since Pavel Buchnevich was traded a few years ago. So I think he's going to be kind of that unsung hero. I think he's going to help that line. Look, he's not the flashiest, sexiest acquisition the Rangers could have made, but hence unsung. But I think he's going to help. He's not an overly exciting type player, but he's really solid. I think he's going to add some consistency to that line. Maybe flirt with around 50 points on that line. I think that he's really going to help. And if they can have at least two consistently good even strength lines, that's going to go a long way for them. Another question: any major regular season awards we anticipate for the Rangers? The guys who are always going to be in the running for that, I think, are Fox for Norris and Shesterkin for Vezina. You could argue maybe if Panarin has another season like last year, he could get into the Hart Trophy conversation, but it's going to be hard to break through that top tier of guys like McDavid, Draisaitl, Matthews, McKinnon. But anyway, I think Fox and Shesterkin will probably be right there in the running for Norris and Vezina, but that ultimately they won't win. Some of us think that one or more of those guys could win, but we'll see what happens. But I think regardless that they're both going to have excellent seasons. That's pretty much all as far as like the questions that we discussed on our Blue Shirt Banner Roundtable. But as far as the keys to success for this team, I don't think they're going to have to worry too much about special teams, particularly power play. We'll see. They've had a little bit of turnover on the penalty kill, with particularly with Barclay Goodrow going out the door. But I think they'll be fine, if not elite, on both special teams units. Obviously, they're very good in net with Shesterkin. I think, like it's been the past few years, it's going to come down to, maybe not in the regular season, but in the playoffs, if they want success, assuming they get there. I mean, that'd be a disaster if they miss, but assuming they get to the postseason, it's going to come down to their ability to produce offense at 5-on-5. And that's going to fall ultimately on guys like Zibanejad, Kreider, to lift their games. Even Panarin last season, after a great regular season, by that Florida series, had taken a bit of a step back in scoring, which, look, it's expected to some degree. You're facing better competition. It's the playoffs, but the gap can't be that big between regular season performance and postseason performance. So it's going to be on those veteran guys, Zibanejad, Kreider, Panarin, to really elevate their play in the postseason, like Vincent Trocheck and Alexei Lafreniere did last season, where those are examples of players whose games actually got better in the playoffs. And that's what the Rangers are going to need out of their stars. And I mean, we've got, some evidence now over the past few years that that's maybe not what we're going to get out of those players, but we'll see, adding a new guy to the mix and Riley Smith on that top line, maybe some experience kind of helps with that. But that's kind of my biggest hang up as far as this team's ability to go all the way. I think that's their biggest issue. It has been for years now, is the even strength play. They're so good we projected they'll be so good on special teams and in net that they don't even have to be elite at even strength. I mean, that'd be great if they were, but they just have to not get caved in like they did for so much of that Florida series. If they can be competitive at even strength in the playoffs against the top teams, and those other two linchpins, special teams and goaltending, stay at the high level we expect them to, then they're going to have a real shot. But until I see it, I have my doubts. So, not to end on a sour note there, but I do think, again, to maybe give it a little bit more positive spin here, I think the Rangers are going to have another great regular season. I think they're poised for a deep playoff run. Maybe they add some guys or an acquisition or two at the trade deadline to help boost that even strength play, depending on kind of where it is throughout the year. And maybe the breaks go their way in the playoffs. But hopefully by the end of the season, we can be talking about playoff preview, and we'll dive more into that at that point. But until then, excited for the beginning of the regular season, and go Rangers.